Okay, hi everyone. This is Lindsay. Once again, nice to see you here. Today we have my very good friend Scott Chewy Hill. His nickname that we go by in Australia is Chewy. He's known as Scott by all of his New Zealand friends and family. But yeah, I call him Chewy. His wife calls him Scott. So, Scott, Chewy, I'm going to call you Chewy because that's what I know you as. Thank you so much for joining me here today. It's really great to have you. We're going to be talking about your love life, the story that God created between you and your wife, which I love hearing. So thank you so much for joining us. I'd just like to introduce you to everyone. So I've met Chewy from my university. So I've known Chewy for 7 years now. I met him in 2014 when I was a first year at my university, and Chewy is clearly a little bit older than me, so he wasn't actually a student when we met. He's actually the security guard, and so I met him not because I was misbehaving or anything, but actually I did misbehave just a little bit, but nothing terrible.
Just loud.
Yeah. So anyway, Chewy is a really good mate of mine. Chewy, what do you want to say about our friendship from the start?
This is going to be this starts off rough, kind of like the rest of this conversation will probably have tones of this, but as you already well know, I found you really hard work in the beginning, and I didn't have a lot of time for you. And long story short, the Lord works in mysterious ways. I would say that you have become one of my closest and most appreciated and trusted friends for numerous reasons. And God truly does work in mysterious ways, because 7 odd years ago, man, time flies, I don't think I would have predicted that in any way, shape or form. But regardless, I am very grateful for the journey that we've been on together. And yeah.
Yep. That's a nice way to say it. Very nice. Thank you. Yeah. No, I was a bit rough as a first year. But yeah, in my second year, Chewy actually began a prayer group in the evenings, and I became a part of that pretty early on, and we kind of just stuck together ever since then, and praying together 3 or 4 nights a week for 4 years straight, or whatever it was. That really builds a friendship quite nicely. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And so when we were in prayer group, it wasn't just praying, it was more like a life group or something like that. So for me, it was almost like church, actually. I remember us discussing it was kind of like church for us both.
It's the only church that I really had at the time, to be honest, given the fact that I was working nights and I was feeling a little bit disillusioned with church in general. I don't think if it hadn't been for, I guess, listening to God's calling and starting that group, and largely the presence of yourself there that kept that going a lot when I was feeling disillusioned or over it, or not feeling like it was making any changes. You turned up religiously, and I'm really grateful for that, because it really wasn't just a prayer group. It was church in its purest sense, because it really felt like a small hospital for sinners. We experienced so much growth amongst the members there, and healing and miracles through prayer and people's family members from a distance. It was an amazing time.
Yeah, it really was. And so with it being like a life group, like church, we didn't just pray, we actually really got to know each other. And there was a lot of times that we got to know each other by telling funny stories, or like I remember we all shared the really just horrible stuff that was happening in our lives. Like, you watched me ugly cry a number of times. And yeah, like it was very raw and very real. And I remember one of my very favorite stories that you repeated a couple times, just depending on who hadn't heard it already, sitting at the group, was a story of you and Mandy, and how God brought you guys together. And so I'd like to just ask you, how old were you when this started to take place, and sort of what was going on in your life to bring you to the point that you got to?
How old was I? Wow, nearly 20 years ago. I would have been about 23 at the time, I believe. And up until that date, from about the age of 8 years old, I didn't go more than 4 weeks without a girlfriend.
From the age of 8, you always had a girlfriend?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was just looking for love a lot. And yeah. And so anyways, I guess I went into every relationship I ever had, probably not from the years of 8, but certainly as I got into my early teens, every girl was the one. I wanted to get married and I wanted to be loved, and so I got heartbroken a lot, and I made a lot of poor decisions in the pursuit of that. And I guess long story short, I got to like 23, I'd been dating a girl in the church, and I thought things were going pretty well. And one day I came to pick her up for a drama practice that we had on that afternoon through the church. And I came over a couple of hours early because I thought it'd be nice to hang out, and then we'll drive out to our drama practice that was at the church campground. And when I let myself in and walked up the stairs, as per usual, all her flatmates sort of turned around on the couch and had this like really nervous, like, uh-oh look on their face, which I didn't really think about until after the event. But I went up the next set of stairs to her bedroom and walked in, and a young guy turned his head to me and said, "Who are you?" And she said, "Who is it?" from underneath him. And I replied to him, "Clearly nobody," and left. And that broke me a bit, obviously. And there was a lot more to that story, but unnecessary to go through.
Fair enough.
And after that point, I just broke before God. And I remember being, I don't know where or when, but I remember being on my knees before God, and as you said before, probably ugly crying. And I was just broken, and I said to God, I am clearly really terrible at this. I think I used other words, but I'm sick of it. I'm sick of being hurt and broken, and I give this over to you. You know what I want in my life. I'd like a wife, and I'd like to have somebody to love and be loved by. And I'm sick of this hurt. So I'm going to leave it over to you. And I would imagine God probably said, finally. And so for the next 18 months, I just continued attending church. And through all this time I attended church, I've never not really gone to church, but I was living a lifestyle that was not of somebody that loved God. I was out sleeping around and drinking, and by the grace of God, I never did drugs. I think I was always worried that with the addictive personality that I have, if I did drugs, my life would have been very over and very different. So Thankfully, despite the fact that sometimes being daily presented with that opportunity, I never did. But yeah, I continued going to church over the next 18 months, and with my group of friends in Bishopdale Church and Christchurch, wonderful church, I miss it dearly. There was a girl there by the name of Amanda Robinson, who was is 5 years my junior. And for obvious reasons, at the age I was, I'd never really paid attention to her, and just had never came on my radar. She was in the youth department, and she was the awkward, quiet girl that would sit in the corner that you'd never really, would catch your eye or pay attention to unless somebody pointed her out. And I just remember sitting up the back of church one day, and I always used to sit up the back of church. I had a little wooden briefcase. In fact, I've still got it. It's right here.
That's so cool.
In there, I keep all of my drawing stuff, and I used to write a bit of poetry and draw and whatnot through the service, and just to sort of keep me focused on the service. I need to keep my hands busy.
Yeah.
And anyways, I was sitting in the service one day, and it's like God grabbed me by my hair and just lifted that. I know, funny, but I used to have hair. And lifted my head up, and it's like he lifted this veil off my eyes, and all of a sudden I seen my wife, who was up on the front with the singing group, and I went, wow, she's attractive. And then I immediately fought that idea, because I was like, no, she's not. I don't find this girl attractive. Like, what am I doing? And there was just all of this conflict in my head, and it wouldn't go away. And for weeks and weeks, I was going to church, and I kept noticing her like I never had before. Like, I just kept noticing her, and I was wrestling with it, because she was a bit younger than me, and she was totally different to the girls that I would usually chase. I mean, I was out, clubbing, chasing clubbing girls, and she was young and innocent and lovely and didn't wear any makeup and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't my deal. And so I wrestled and wrestled and wrestled, but it just wouldn't go away. And I prayed about it a few times, and eventually I felt convicted to give her a call and ask her if she'd like to go out on a date. And that was funny in itself, because my dear mother-in-law, I don't know if she's holding the wrong end of the phone or whatever, but I called and asked if Mandy was available to talk to, and she asked who was calling, and I told her this is her mother. And she went into Mandy's room, and she said, phone's for you, Scott Hill. What does he want? And I'm going, I can hear this whole thing. Anyways, phone was handed over, and I sort of, said what was going on, and asked her if she was available to go out, I think next Thursday night, to dinner and movies, and she accepted. And so from that, we started hanging out a bit, and a relationship started to develop.
Yeah, I remember you telling this story before and saying that she was already really interested in you.
Well,
or attracted to you or something.
I think maybe a little bit. Like, it's interesting, your perception of yourself and other people's perception of yourself. As I said, like, I've always gone to church. I've always prided myself on trying to be a really decent human being. I guess in the eyes of some of the members of the church, I didn't really try to hide what I was doing. I came to church every weekend, and in youth class and stuff, I would ask for prayer, because I knew full well that I was probably going to go out and get really drunk that night. And I constantly, it seems crazy now, but there was girls along the way that I would date and try to bring along to church and share my faith. But then, of course, we would go home and sleep with each other outside of marriage, and get drunk together, and do all the things that you shouldn't do as a, God-loving Christian. And then try to bring them to the faith, which seems, it's obviously crazy to me now. Like, you're saying one thing and living something completely different. But through that image, I guess, to a number of church members, unbeknownst to me at the time, but I guess it makes sense. I was a bad boy at church. yeah. So I don't know. I think apparently a lot of girls seem to fall for that bad boy image,
Hmm.
which I don't know. I think it's kind of dumb, but I get it. It's a bit edgy. It's like driving cars fast, I guess. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's fun. Yeah. So anyway, that. We ended up hanging out for a bit.
Okay, so you ended up hanging out for a bit. She was what, 18 and you're 23 at this point. And this is what, like, I think you said 18 months after you asked God to look after your love life, something like that.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so
Yeah.
there was a bit of an in-between stage of just giving it over to God, and then all of a sudden he lifted you up by your hair that you did have, and there she was. And how long did it take for you to get around to asking her out?
Uh, I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was a couple of months.
Hmm.
Um, well, before going out on a date with her or hanging out, leading up to that, I had a lot of my friends, as I said, like she was kind of the quiet, awkward girl, very different to me at church. And a lot of my friend group at church were asking, like, what are you doing, man? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Which sounds horrible to say, but it was just the reality of where things were at the time.
Hmm.
And the shoe's on the other foot now. Everywhere we go, my friends and our friends constantly remind me that I'm punching above my weight. So
Yeah, yeah. Mandy's
judge
gorgeous.
from her. So um, yeah, we just started hanging out as friends for like I think about 3.5 months, and at the time I had been like I was fully into trying to give my life over to God at this point, and particularly my love life. Um, I had been reading through Joshua Harris's "I Kissed Dating Goodbye" and a couple of other books that he wrote. That he wrote. Getting into those at the beginning was mental. Particularly the first couple of chapters, I think there was some of the things that were outlined, and then I was just going, "This is ridiculous! Like, we don't live in the 1800s anymore. Like, who's going to do this?"
Right.
But the more I prayed and the more I read about it, I was convicted, and I went, "This is legitimate. Like, this is godly dating, courting, if you will."
Hmm.
And I fell in love with the idea, and then it got to this stage. It was like, I want that for my life. And so through this sort of hanging out a little bit and reading these books, I started to become very open with Mandy and said, this is what I want for my life. And I shared with her a bit about my past and the brokenness that I had from that. And I guess the reasons I wanted to do things differently. And part of hanging out, I asked her if she would be willing to read these books and just tell me what she thought. And I've never been a particularly quick reader. It took me months to get through these books, and I think she banged out all three of them in about a week and a half or something. So
Yeah.
I guess looking back now, that sort of says she was probably keen. But yeah, she read through all the books and we talked about them. And behind the scenes while this was going on, as I said, like I hadn't been without a girl for more than a month at a time, my entire life at that point.
Yeah.
And I'd been all the way several times around. And so like I remember it was ages until we started holding hands. And then one of the concepts of this book was like the kiss on the altar. You may now
Yeah.
kiss your bride.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that spun me out, because it was talking about why that was so significant was because that should have been the first time you kiss your wife. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But of course, again, the more I prayed about it and thought about it and read about it, I was like, that's beautiful. And that makes a lot of sense. And I want that. It took 3.5 months of Mandy and I, after we actually started dating, for me to kiss her. I was like, oh, you failed. But realistically, in comparison to where I'd been before, that was massive.
Yeah.
And it also laid the groundwork for us to truly start to get to know each other, which I'd never done before because everything had been physical with
Yeah.
previous girls. Like you were sleeping together before you knew their middle name, almost, kind of thing. It wasn't that bad, but it was terrible. So
yeah, I just want to pause on that point for a second. How like you came from this, how many years is that? What, like 15 years of dating nonstop? 15 years of dating nonstop and kissing and sleeping with people and all this kind of thing, pretty much from the get-go with a lot of them. And then God's working on your heart now that you've given your love life to him, and he's able to work on your heart to the point that it took 3.5 months, which might sound small to some people, but is actually huge for you in your growth, in your journey at that time, to actually just hold off and get to know each other. That's really amazing. And that really shows what God was doing in you guys. And I love that gave you guys the opportunity to get to know each other without all the hormones getting in the way.
Yeah. I when I used to hang out a lot on Friday nights at her parents' place, and it was always homemade pizza night on Friday, and then her parents would go off and do their thing, and we'd sit at the table or on the table and chairs outside and just chat. And I distinctly remember that week I'd made up in my mind that I wanted to date her. I wanted her to be my girlfriend. I knew this was going to be serious. And that night we were sitting outside and we'd had dinner, and her parents were sort of fluffing around inside, getting ready for dinner and whatnot. For bed. And it was about 9:30 at night, 9:45. And I asked her if she would like to be my girlfriend, and she said yes. And I said, but before I make this official, like I officially ask you to be my girlfriend, I said, it's not something my parents have ever instilled in me, or whatever the case is. I'm not sure where it came from. I've always, anytime I've dated a girl wherever possible, I've wanted to ask for the permission of her parents. Just like, when you would ask the permission to get married, kind of thing. I've just thought it was important, because like, if the family didn't like you, that's a big hurdle, And so I guess by the wonderful upbringing from my parents, I had a lot of good qualities that a lot of other boys that came around to other girls' places, I guess, didn't have. And so it wasn't usually much of a stretch for me to get the answer yes, just by simply, washing dishes after a meal or something. It made me stand out. But so anyways, I had that discussion with Mandy, and she's like, okay. And so I went to go inside to ask her parents, and they were zipping back and forth between the kitchen and the lounge and whatnot, and I could never get them sort of in the same vicinity at the same time. And during that time, I got nervous, which was a weird concept for me as well. And I piped out and I left, and I ended up saying, I'll see you at church tomorrow. So I went home, and the next day I went to church, and I was sitting in the youth Sabbath school, and her parents came walking up the driveway to church, and I ducked out of Sabbath school real quick, and I went and met them, and I said, hey, Mike and Sharon, I was just wondering if I could have a chat to you at some point today. And they're like, yeah, what's up? And I was like, oh, it's nothing important. Well, it is important. And I just and stumbled and stuttered, and I was an absolute meathead. And they said, okay, and gave me a weird look, as you would, because what's wrong with this guy? So anyways, I went back to Sabbath school class. We did church, and then afterwards I went up the back of the church. Her father has worked at AV at church for years, and her mother had gone up, standing beside the AV booth waiting for Mike to finish up. And so I went up and I said, is it okay if we have a chat now? And she goes, yeah. And I proceeded to stutter. I was like, I was just wondering what you'd feel I had, like, I was going, wow, like, it's not me. I don't usually mix my words too much. And I was like, I just couldn't get it out. And her mother, who's lovely and usually quite quiet and nervous herself, turns around and she goes, well, spit it out. I was like, wow, this is bad. So anyways, I said to them, I was wondering if you would be okay with me dating Mandy. And they said, that will be fine. And so I said, thank you. And I walked away and I went back to Mandy, and it was like 12 after church. And I just said, it's okay with your parents. Would you please be my girlfriend? And she said, yeah. And the rest was history until 3 months later when I broke up with her.
Yes. What happened there?
So during that 3 months, the devil was doing wonderful work. I hate to say that, but I have to give credit where credit's due, and he is good at being a dick. He spent that three and a half months in my ear, just reminding me of how unworthy I was of everything in my life, and couldn't argue with it. It was true. But by the grace of God, he takes that away. But at that stage, I was just struggling, and he was in my ear telling me that I was a piece of trash because I'd done, this, and this. And this girl was innocent and lovely. Mandy, I was Mandy's first handhold, kiss, boyfriend, everything. I'm a blessed man for the woman that I've received. And, in return, she got, yeah. And of course, the devil was happy to remind me of all that whole time. And I guess in the end, I bought into it and I believed it too much. And on the last night of Big Camp in South New Zealand, while everybody else was attending camp concerts and hanging out and having fun, Mandy and I went for a walk, and I broke up with her. And I ashamedly walked away and tried to move on at that point. She apparently walked off crying, and met my brother driving down the road as he was driving out of camp, and he pulled over and asked her what was wrong, and she told him, and he goes, well, he's a dickhead. So maybe it was right. Anyways, yeah, so we broke up at that point, and I was feeling lost and lonely again.
Yeah. Wow. So how long did Mr. Lost and Lonely last for?
Well, it's really funny. My dear wife, even to this very day, never ceases to surprise me. It's never boring, and it's never mundane, and she always makes me laugh and finds new talents to shock and awe me with. And 3 months after that was the first time I bore witness to this, which I didn't actually figure out until 5 years after we were married, I think. So we remained friends. There was no bad blood there.
So for 3 months, you're just friends now?
Yeah, we still seen up each other at church and hung out socially at, church events and whatever, and there was no beef. Still really, I thought really highly of her, always have done. Yeah, so anyway, she rang me one afternoon. I was boarding at a friend of hers from high school, their family's home at the time. And she called me and she asked me, she said, I'm wanting to put a new stereo head unit and some speakers in my car. Do you think you could come and help me find something suitable? I was really big into music and had a decent system in my car at the time and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. And so we went shopping. She turned up and picked me up in her car, and she was all dolled up and looking nice. And we went shopping. And then when we got back, she asked if I could help her install the speakers and stuff in her car, and speaking to my inner man. And I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm a man, I can do that. So that happened. And of course, that actually happened about a week later. I think she came back with the car again, like on a Sunday, and again was all dolled up and looking lovely. And I finished the job, and we were sitting in my room in the house afterwards, just chatting. And of course, I kept looking at her thinking, man, she's looking good. And I leaned in and I kissed her. And as soon as I did that, I pulled away again and I apologized. And I thought, yeah, I'm a dick, I'm a bit of a dog. And she turned to me immediately and said, no, it's okay. And I went, oh, okay. What's happening? And I don't know about the conversation after that. I can't quite remember, but I do remember saying, are we getting back together? And she said yes. So and
I told you how it was going.
yeah, so 3 months down, 3 months apart, and then back together. And 3 years later we got married.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was actually later that same day. She stayed around till later at night, and I ended up having sort of a conflict in my mind again of what was going on, and I sort of explained to her again why I'd broken up with her. And I think shameful man moment here, but I think I ended up in tears in front of her and just sort of exclaiming how I didn't feel like I was worthy of her because of the things that I'd done, you know, the stuff that the devil was pouring into my ears, constantly reminding me of. And I just remember her reaching out at one point and grabbing me by the hand. And my wife is really quiet and meek most of the time, and she doesn't sort of push herself out there socially, and even among people that she's close with and family. Sometimes she's just not like that. But I remember her reaching out and grabbing me by the hand, and she looked me in the eye and she said, I don't care what you've done in the past. I love you for who you are now. And that just broke me. But that was the first time, and I didn't realize it then, but that was like the first time I think I'd tangibly experienced unconditional love for me. And it just broke me. And I think I knew in that moment that she was going to be my wife.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. That's great. It's really nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I know there's like heaps and heaps more stories, but I think we've covered like probably the best bits that I wanted to get to. Was there anything else that you wanted to share at all?
I guess, I don't know why, but it seems our relationships seem to be based around the number 3. Because basically 3 years after that, we got married. And, you know, our story into engagement, and it is not your traditional love story. Like most people have a lovely memory of when their husband proposed to them and that kind of stuff, and that little dream set up. Ours is trash.
Yeah.
It sucks.
It's hilariously trash.
It's so cringe. We could maybe talk about that another time or something, but it's so cringe. Mandy hates it. It makes me cringe a little bit now too. But I've always kind of found it funny because of the end result, because we have what we have now. But going back to the things of threes, and I don't know, it's just coincidence, I think. But you know, 3 months broke up, 3 months later got back together, 3 years later we got married, and 3 years after we got married, we were this close to divorce. It's not even funny. And you know, looking back now, a large portion of that was I had great expectations as a man about what marriage was going to be. It was, you know, I guess pretty old school and a bit chauvinistic in the fact that I was expecting nice hot cooked meals, and my mother was one of the most amazing cooks on the planet. And so, to meet that expectation was, not really attainable. In fear of being crass, sex on tap, all of that kind of stuff, which never really came to fruition. And we spent a lot of that time with me, going through spouts of doing the dishes and vacuuming the house and ticking all those boxes that I thought might make my wife want to sleep with me and that silly stuff. And just never really hitting the mark on for both of us. And, pulled out of church there for a while because, I tried to blame church for the downfall of our marriage, with Mandy getting so heavily involved at church and work. And basically we were just doing big avoidance things. And things got really, really bad. And I still remember the night vividly, 2010, July. And my brother was staying over, and there was a youth church service at Toronto Church the following day that Mandy was a part of, and she was going to speak up the front a little bit for something, which is big for her because she's not a speak up the front kind of girl.
Yeah.
And she came out that night. My brother and I were sitting in front of the TV watching a movie, playing PlayStation or whatever on Sabbath. And she came out and asked if I was going to come to church tomorrow because, the youth thing was happening and she was going to speak. And I just cut her off. And I said, why would I? I said, oh, no interest. And she goes, oh, but I'm going to be speaking. I went, so? And she went back to bed, clearly upset. At that stage, I'd been seeing a counsellor. And I just sort of we argued a lot. And she would often just sort of shut me down and sort of say, let's talk about this when you are less angry. And for me, that was never going to change because I felt like I was never getting heard. And it didn't seem like she realized how serious things were. And I told this to the counsellor, and the counsellor at the time asked me if I had another bedroom at home. I said, yeah. And he said, maybe make the point of moving all your stuff out of our marriage bedroom and start making a split and just sleep in another room and that kind of jazz. Maybe it'll encourage her to realize that this is pretty serious. Up until that point, I kind of hadn't done that, but that felt like the right time. And so I went back into the bedroom and I sat down on the edge of the bed and I told her what I've just said. And I turned to her and I said, look, if things haven't changed in any great dramatic form before the end of the year, before graduation, because that was her graduation year, I said, when your parents come over, I said, just pack up your stuff and go home, go back to New Zealand. I said, I'm done at this point. I feel like I'm living with my sister and I'm just over it. This isn't what I signed up for and I've had enough. And so I said, yeah, just pack up your stuff and go home. I said, I don't feel like I've got much to go back to. I like my job here. Just go, leave me alone. And I got up to leave. And Mandy used to just sort of shut down when we'd argue. And I know that was largely because I get loud and angry and didn't give her room to actually process or talk. But in this instance, she just broke down into tears and she said, stop, wait. And then she finally opened up to me and shared a lot of stuff, which, I think in the back of my mind I already knew, and it's largely a lot to do with me. But until it actually came out of her mouth, I didn't know how to deal with it, and it wasn't real. I guess I was still trying to make things her fault or everybody else's fault and not take ownership for it. From that night forward, things started to change because it was evident now that we were both wanting to fix things. And we both had a voice. And so there was a lot of stuff that happened in between that. Me giving my life back to Jesus actively, keeping the Sabbath again actively. The devil physically attacking me in my sleep the very night that I made that decision. So much stuff in that time, but we are, what are we, 11 years on from that point now. And I think that first 3 years after that, it was kind of like probably breaking down all of that trash that we'd built up. And then I feel like the 3 years after that sort of brought us to probably a bit of a neutral ground, almost like we probably should have been when we first started dating, like we were when we started dating.
Right.
And then 3 years after that, 5 it has been after that now, they have felt like probably what they should have been in the beginning, like our honeymoon years. And as I said, like daily, she surprises me, and I love her more every day now than I did the day we got married. I feel like the most blessed man on the planet, and she makes me smile every day. And I hope that I can, she could say the same thing. She probably still makes me smile a little bit more than I make her smile. But yeah, I guess the plus side is it's a God-centered marriage now, and we truly, truly love each other, and I couldn't imagine life without her.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Jesus.
Amen. Yeah, I've noticed a lot in the past few years, whenever I talk to you on the phone or whatever, and you happen to be at home and you see Mandy as you walk past or whatever, you'll just like say, oh, and I'm like, what is it? And you're like, oh, she's just so beautiful. And I'm like, all right, okay. Like, just doesn't stop. And it's so wonderful to see and to hear that. Yeah,
it's wonderful to be in that.
Lucky you. It sounds like really hard fought for, and I'm really glad that it's turned out like you've been in 5 years of honeymoon mode, and hopefully for the rest of your life you will be. So 3 years of just going downhill from marriage, 3 years of building it back to a place of neutrality. Was it 3 years of just being in a normal space, and then like since then?
I think so. We were sort of learning. I think once we sort of spent that first 3 years breaking down all of that mess that we built up, I think we put ourselves in a space where we were neutral again, and I guess learning each other for the first time, really, without any of the expectations or hurts or whatever that is, I think once we sort of found that, laying the foundation again properly, if you will, I guess, to use the analogy of a house, it was legitimately like, ironically, a little bit like our first house build. It was so painful, which you'll remember from prayer group. It was making me swear nearly every other night. And it was just like somebody came in and dismantled the house and tore up the concrete and left us with a bare property again and started from the get-go. But this time it was done with the right contract and the right builders, and done properly, and everything was not skimped on, and the result is a beautiful home, or a beautiful marriage, if you will. That's lovely. So to me, your story sounds very much like the kingdom marriages a lot of people are looking forward to, and me included, all about that. And I guess I just find it really interesting to see where you've come from the very start with, dating for 15 years and giving your love life to God. And then 18 months later, God showed you your wife, and you were like, not so sure. And it took a little bit of time before you got into that. And then it was a bit rocky there for a bit. And then you got married, and then it kind of went downhill, and it looked like divorce was on the table for a while. And it's just been a whole up and down journey. And I know in our culture, especially with a lot of like
Hollywood movies and stuff, we get fed the fairy tale. And everyone just thinks that, you know, you get married and you live happily ever after, but it's not even that. It's definitely not that. And it takes work, even a kingdom marriage, even a marriage that God has, you know, completely unveiled your eyes and said, this is the one. Like from the start, it might not look like the one. And once you're in it, it might look like it's headed for failure, but it takes work. So
marriage is hard work.
Yeah. Can you tell?
Marriage really is hard work. Some days, some weeks and months are easier than others, but there's always going to be conflict, because while you become one, you are still two different individuals and you still have differing opinions. But anybody that says marriage isn't hard work is lying. You've got to fight for it every day, because, particularly as a Christian, because the devil hates you, and he hates marriages, and he hates things that represent the love of God, and that's what marriage does. And so if you're happy in marriage, he hates you and he wants to break that, and he tries daily. I guess, it's, I lost my train of thought there.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, you're right.
But I mean, like anything, if anything worth having is worth fighting for, and the more you fight for something, the more you appreciate it.
And how do you fight?
That was my train of thought before. So something that has changed for Mandy and I, we haven't changed as individuals. I'm still loud and get angry quickly. She's still quiet and tends to withdraw when I get angry. But we also know now how we, as sort of our natural preset and function. And so I used to chase her around the house almost and just be demanding that we fix it, because I need it fixed now to be able to move on, whereas she was happy to sit on it for a day or two and just sort of process and then get back to it, which I couldn't deal with. So you find ways to respectfully function together in love, and the way that we've done that is we don't have fights anymore that would last more than 20 minutes tops. And like, we can get, like, there's been times over the years where I've got seethingly angry again and sworn and yelled and all that stuff that I'm not proud of, but literally within 15-20 minutes it's done. And the way we've gone about that is we've agreed years ago that because we're different people and because we have differing opinions, sometimes we're just not going to agree on stuff. Even as much as we want to, we won't agree on it because we're different people. When it comes to, you know, decor in the home and all that kind of stuff, we're blessed. We really love the same things, and those kind of things are easy. I can't even think off the top of my head what we would disagree on right now, but it happens regularly. But in it, we agreed years ago that even if we weren't sorry for what we were arguing about, we were sorry for arguing because we love each other. And so if we need to go away for 5 or 10 minutes and just cool down a bit, fine. I mean, when I say we, I mean me. But, you know, we do that, and I always come back and we hug each other and we say, I love you, and we say, I'm sorry for fighting. And 9 times out of 10, you know, I might whisper in each other's ear and go, I still think you're wrong and you're a dickie, but I love you. But 9 times out of 10, we end up laughing about it, still not agreeing, but being okay that we're sorry about the argument and knowing that we still love each other. And that's been amazing.
Yeah, that sounds so great. I don't think I've ever heard anyone else do that before. Yeah, that's cool. Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Just okay, yeah, off the top of my head, for those of you out there that are looking for love, stop. Seriously, stop. The only person or being that you should be looking for love from is Jesus. And that is the key to my success story. I was seeking love my entire life, and because I was seeking it within my own power, I failed so hard every time. God has somebody special for you, and it's in God's timing. You know, there's a lot of stuff that happened in my marriage that I wish hadn't have, but if it hadn't happened any other way, it wouldn't be what it is now. And I wouldn't be able to share this story with other people that are maybe going through the same thing or whatever. And so, you know, there's nothing, I've done a lot of dumb, horrible stuff in my life that I regret, a lot of stuff. And the question comes, would I change, if I could change anything in my life, what would it be? Honestly, nothing. Not a single thing, because every single thing, as horrible or as wonderful as it's ever been, has made me who I am today. And it's given me the opportunity, particularly those, you know, God will take any bad thing and use it to his glory. I've been able to connect with so many people, students at college over the years, that have been broken and have come into my office at night and said, Chewy, if I told you my testimony, you'd be in tears. And I've said, please, if I hadn't done it myself or sat beside somebody else that was doing it, I'll be shocked. So if you can make me cry or upset me or shock me by your testimony, I'll, you know, we'll talk about it, but I highly doubt that. And that has always been the case. And, you know, I've shared with them some stories from my life of things that I've done, and they've been in shock themselves. And, you know, it's lovely that a lot of those students over the years have held me in high regard, and I've been able to take that from them and say that, yeah, I've made some serious mistakes, and I'm not a wonderful human being. I'm just another broken sinner that God's shown grace to. So, yeah, I guess back to, you know, stop seeking love. Seriously, seek God. You were talking about a verse before. I have a couple. From a man's perspective, I have my wife's Bible here that I bought for her a few years ago. I don't know if you can read that, but it's got it embossed on the front. It says her name in Proverbs 31:10 through 31, which is, you know, the virtuous wife.
All right, yeah.
I had that put on her Bible, not because she should be that or that's what I'm hoping for. God's grace delivered that woman to me. She is that. She ticks every box, and I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah.
I wrote in the front, it says, when I grew in love with you, I realized I've never truly loved anyone. I realized I never will truly love anyone the way I love you. And that's not flowery words. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And back to seeking God instead of love. Through seeking God, you get love. And God wants to bless you, and he knows what you need in your life, and he knows at what time you need it. And one of the verses that has rung true for me my entire life, and just almost daily, particularly at the moment with all the trash going on in the world, is just re-emphasized, and that's Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And all these things, I believe that talks about, that's referring to everything that we want and need in our lives. And when you seek God and his will for your life, his will becomes your will. And, you know, that will undoubtedly, I believe, mean a love for you, a tangible somebody to hold.
Yeah.
Because for me personally, his gift to me of Mandy was the single thing on this earth that has helped me in a tangible sense understand the unconditional love that God has for me. I couldn't comprehend that before I experienced it through my wife.
Yeah.
And I'm so, so grateful for that. He gave me my wife so that I could be closer to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with a friend just last night on the same topic, where she was saying, you know, I was living in this place and then God said, all right, you need to move out so I can show you more of my love through that. And then now you need to move out because I've shown you everything I can there. And now you need to come here so I can show you more. And now we're moving on to this. And now you're going to get a husband. And that's how I'm going to show you my love even more now. Just like that continual progression of, you know, you have to learn some things along the way. You have to experience God's love in various ways, and then he can show you more of his love through that other person, through that unconditional love that you said that you received from her. So yeah, I love chatting with you every and any time, and I really love this story. I find it so encouraging for me personally, and I know so many others are going to as well. So thank you so much for sharing.
That cliche little saying, God is good. I wish it wasn't cliche and it truly held the weight that it does. In fact, I had a young guy through church a year or so back on social media. I said to him one night, God is good, for whatever we were talking about. And he said, no, Chewy, God isn't good. And I was like, okay. And he said, God is great. And I was like, I like that a lot. And it's funny because I used to do hashtag God is good on the bottom of my Instagram posts and stuff now, and I don't anymore. I always put God is great, because he truly is.
That's awesome. Oh, that's cool. Awesome. I feel like we could talk forever and ever, but I think we're gonna land the plane here. What do you reckon?
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone out there. Thank you so much for making it this far with us tonight, or whatever time of day it is for you when you're watching this. Thank you so much for sticking around. Thank you so much for watching this channel and liking, subscribing, all that. Chewy, is it okay if I put your Insta details or whatever for everyone to follow?
Sure.
All right, his Instagram details will be in the description below, so go follow him. He is bald, bearded, and beautiful, he reckons.
Is that what's on there?
Well, a lot of the time, that's one of your hashtags, yes. We even put it in the Jack book as part of the dedication to you, because that's
oh really?
So you. Okay.
Trying to convince myself, I think.
All right, thank you guys. I'll see you next week. Bye.
See you, Lindsay. Love you.